Close your eyes and let the world slow down. Take a deep breath, and another. Feel the gentle rhythm of your heartbeat, steady and calm. Tonight, you will walk into the quiet halls of a distant palace, where the air is soft with morning mist and the stones beneath your feet have witnessed centuries of history. Imagine the tall corridors stretching endlessly, the sunlight filtering through high windows, and the faint scent of dew and night flowers. Each step is slow, deliberate, like the unfolding of a dream. And as you enter this world, allow yourself to drift gently, letting the calm, measured pace guide you deeper into rest. If you enjoy this journey into history and calm reflection, consider supporting our channel with a subscription. Your quiet presence helps these stories grow, and every follow is like a soft whisper, carrying the tale forward into new nights of sleep and wonder. Now, breathe slowly, feel the calm settling over you, and let us begin. The soft light of dawn seeped through the tall windows of the palace, painting the walls in hues of gold and amber. Outside, the morning mist lingered over the Prussian fields, curling around the distant trees like a whispered secret. In the quiet of his chambers, King Friedrich William I rose from his bed, his tall frame silhouetted against the soft light. He moved with a precision that matched the rhythm of his thoughts, each step deliberate, measured. There was a vision in his mind, a picture of his kingdom strong, disciplined, and orderly. It was not enough for Prussia to exist, it must excel. His soldiers, his people, even the walls themselves, everything must reflect the greatness he imagined. He lingered by the window, looking down at the courtyard where guards practiced their drills. Each movement, each command, seemed too slow to him, though to the untrained eye it was perfect. A faint frown creased his brow. Perfection, he thought, could always be refined. Yet within him, a quiet unease lingered. Ambition alone could not forge a kingdom, it required compliance, dedication, and sacrifice. And sometimes, the sacrifices demanded were not easily asked for or understood. He turned from the window, letting the morning light fall upon the polished floors, and whispered to himself, almost as if testing his own resolve. A kingdom is not built in silence, it is shaped in the hands of those who dare to bend it toward greatness. And so the day began. Not with joy, not with celebration, but with a meticulous plan, an invisible blueprint for the future, a blueprint that only he could see in its entirety. Outside the palace, the city slowly awoke, unaware that the men walking these quiet halls would shape its destiny in ways both awe-inspiring and relentless. The morning progressed with a quiet rhythm, broken only by the soft clatter of hooves and the distant murmur of voices in the palace courtyard. Friedrich William I walked among the marble halls, his cloak brushing the polished floors. Each corridor seemed to echo his presence, carrying his thoughts like whispers to the walls themselves. He paused at a window overlooking the training yard, where soldiers, already awake, were practicing their drills. His gaze lingered on one young recruit, slightly taller than the others, moving with a grace that hinted at untapped potential. A flicker of intrigue crossed the king's eyes. Could this youth, so young yet so promising, become part of the vision he had carefully crafted in his mind? Yet even as he admired the promise of strength, a shadow of doubt crept quietly at the edges of his thoughts. Discipline and loyalty could be taught, but would all hearts bend to his will? Some men were stubborn, some too soft, and some, dangerous in their unpredictability. The kingdom required more than mere obedience, it demanded a unity of purpose, a single-minded dedication to the king's design. A faint tapping at the door drew his attention. One of his advisors, an older man with a measured step and cautious eyes, entered the room. He bowed low, his voice carrying the careful weight of knowledge. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "the council awaits your presence. There are matters of importance to discuss." Friedrich William I nodded, turning from the window. In his mind, he already knew what awaited him: questions about resources, about soldiers, about the future of his realm. Each decision would ripple through the lives of countless men and women. And yet, there was a thrill in this responsibility, a quiet excitement at the power to shape, to direct, to perfect. As he walked down the corridor, the flicker of sunlight across the tapestry seemed almost like a silent applause. But beneath the calm, a thought lingered, almost like a whisper he could not shake. Not all will follow willingly, some will resist. And resistance must be addressed. The palace, though serene in the morning light, held its first stirrings of intrigue. The day had only begun, yet already, the kingdom seemed alive with secrets waiting to be discovered. The council chamber smelled faintly of wax and old wood, a scent that clung to the air like a whisper of history. Friedrich William I entered, his steps echoing softly against the marble floor. The room fell silent, every eye trained on the tall, commanding figure of their king. Even the flickering candlelight seemed to bend toward him, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the walls. Advisors and ministers waited, their expressions carefully measured. Some hid curiosity beneath polite restraint, others attempted to conceal unease. All of them understood that in this room, words carried weight, and silence could be a weapon. "My counsel," the king began, his voice calm but firm, "we must consider the future of Prussia, not as it is, but as it must become. Strength is not given, it is forged. And we are the forgers." A murmur ran through the room, soft, uncertain. One minister dared to speak, carefully choosing his words. "Your Majesty, the citizens have concerns. The army is growing, yes, but so are the burdens of those who serve." Friedrich William I's eyes narrowed slightly. Not in anger, but in quiet calculation. Every word, every hesitation, became a part of his mental map. He nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch, allowing the weight of his authority to settle over the room like a heavy, invisible cloak. "Concerns," he said finally, voice softening almost imperceptibly, "are not enemies. But they must not deter us from the path. Every man, every woman, every soldier, each must understand the role they play in the kingdom we shape. This is not punishment. This is destiny." As he spoke, the king's mind wandered briefly, imagining the faces of the young soldiers in the courtyard, the ones whose potential had already caught his attention. Could he mold them into more than mere men of Prussia? Could he inspire loyalty so complete that the kingdom itself would seem to breathe in rhythm with their discipline? And yet, beneath the certainty, a quiet, unspoken question lingered. Even the strongest army could not guard against disobedience in hearts. Even the most careful plans could unravel if those bound to them wavered. The council meeting ended without fanfare. The advisors filed out, some with relief, some with a trace of apprehension. The king remained, staring at the map spread before him. Lines of roads, towns, and battlegrounds crisscrossed the parchment like veins of life itself. He touched a small mark on the map, tracing it with his finger. His whisper, almost lost in the room, carried the weight of command. Every piece in its place, every life, every soul, must serve the vision. Outside, the sun climbed higher, spilling golden light across the city. Within the palace walls, however, a tension lingered, quiet and persistent, like the first stirrings of wind before a storm. The afternoon sun filtered through the grand windows, casting long, golden beams across the palace halls. Friedrich William I walked slowly, almost as if in a dream, his mind drifting beyond the maps and council chambers. His thoughts wandered to the army, his beloved army, the heart of his vision for Prussia. He recalled the young soldiers in the courtyard, their disciplined movements, their eager faces. Yet in his mind's eye, they were not enough. They could march, they could follow commands, they could fight, but could they inspire awe? Could they embody the strength and greatness of Prussia itself? A whisper of an idea stirred, a vision of soldiers taller than the rest, statuesque and commanding, standing like living pillars of the kingdom. They would not merely follow orders, they would carry the spirit of Prussia in every stride, every glance. He paused before a tapestry depicting past kings, their armor gleaming even in the dim light. His fingers brushed the edge as though seeking counsel from the ancestors. In their silent, frozen gazes, he imagined the approval of some hidden judgment, a nod of understanding. But even as the idea grew, a quiet tension lingered within him. How to bring this vision to life? How to find men who could embody such ideals, who could rise above the ordinary? The thought was both thrilling and unsettling. The kingdom depended on it, yet the path forward was uncertain. A soft sound interrupted his thoughts, the distant laughter of children playing in the palace gardens. Their small, carefree figures seemed to mock the seriousness of his vision. And yet, in their innocence, he saw possibility. Every life held potential, and perhaps, with guidance, some could become the pillars he imagined. Friedrich William I exhaled slowly, letting the idea settle into the quiet rhythm of the afternoon. It was a plan that would take years, patience, and vigilance. But he welcomed the challenge. To shape the kingdom, he must begin with the foundation, the men who would carry its strength. As evening approached, the light softened into shades of rose and lavender, and the palace seemed to sigh along with him. In that gentle glow, the king's thoughts wandered to the future, a kingdom not just strong, but monumental, standing tall in the eyes of the world. And in the hush of the palace, a subtle thrill tingled along his spine, a mixture of anticipation and unease. The dream of giants had begun, and with it, the slow, meticulous shaping of a vision unlike any other. As twilight draped the city in gentle purples and silvers, Friedrich William I sat in his study, the flicker of candlelight casting dancing shadows across the walls. Scrolls and ledgers lay before him, each a record of men in towns and villages, each a potential piece in his growing vision of a disciplined, towering army. He traced a finger along the names, pausing occasionally, imagining the men behind the words. Some were ordinary, unremarkable. Others, tall and strong, seemed to gleam even on the page. The thought stirred an excitement within him, a quiet thrill that mixed strategy with something deeper, almost like the anticipation of discovering a hidden treasure. Yet even in this calm, a flicker of doubt lingered. Could such men be found? Could they truly embody the ideals he imagined? And what of those who resisted, who would not bend willingly to his plans? The questions were silent, unspoken, yet they pressed upon him like the weight of the crown itself. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. In the hush of the evening, he pictured the courtyard once more. The soldiers practiced tirelessly, yet he saw only possibilities. Taller men, stronger men, men whose presence alone would command respect. He imagined them standing like pillars along the palace walls, the embodiment of Prussia's strength and discipline. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. An aide entered quietly, bowing low. "Your Majesty," he said in a hushed tone, "the first recruits have arrived from the northern towns. They are, as you requested, tall and strong." Friedrich Wilhelm I's eyes lit with a rare spark of satisfaction. He rose slowly, letting the candlelight play across his features. "Show them to me," he commanded, his voice calm but firm. Outside, in the courtyard, the men stood in hesitant lines. Some shifted nervously, unsure of the purpose of this unusual summons. The king walked among them, observing quietly, his gaze sharp and discerning. Each step, each posture, each subtle movement told him more than any report could. Yet beneath his measured exterior, a deeper question stirred, a quiet tension that refused to be silenced. Would these men rise to the ideal he imagined, or would they falter? Could discipline alone create greatness, or was something else required, something more subtle, more personal? The evening deepened, and the courtyard emptied, leaving only the echo of footsteps on stone. In the quiet, Friedrich Wilhelm I lingered, contemplating the challenge before him. The search had begun, but the true work, the shaping, the molding, the forging of his vision, was only just starting. And as the first stars appeared in the sky, a soft wind whispered through the palace gardens, carrying with it a sense of possibility, and the faintest hint of uncertainty. The morning mist lingered low over the palace grounds, curling around the statues and the polished stone of the courtyard. Friedrich Wilhelm I walked slowly among the recruits, his tall figure cutting a striking silhouette in the soft light. Today, the recruits would face their first trials, not in battle, but in patience, precision, and poise. The king observed quietly, letting the rhythm of their movements unfold like a soft melody. Each command, each step, each posture was a note in a composition only he could hear. He noted the hesitation in some, the overconfidence in others, and the rare spark of potential in a few. Those were the ones who caught his eye, not merely for their height or strength, but for something subtler, the way they carried themselves, the small, almost imperceptible way they responded to pressure. Friedrich Wilhelm I walked slowly among them, occasionally stopping to correct a stance or adjust a posture. His hands, usually still, now moved with quiet authority, shaping, guiding, refining. And yet, even in this calm, a flicker of unease tugged at him. Could discipline alone shape greatness, or was there a quality he could not teach, a quality that must be discovered within? A soft wind rustled the flags atop the palace towers, and the king paused, listening to the whisper of fabric against stone. In that gentle murmur, he imagined the kingdom itself, its people, its soldiers, its future. Everything depended on these small moments, these subtle choices. As the day wore on, the recruits began to settle into the rhythm of the trials. Some faltered, some excelled, and a few revealed glimpses of something extraordinary. Friedrich Wilhelm I's heart, usually steady and measured, stirred with quiet excitement. This was the beginning, the first shaping of the pillars upon which his vision would stand. By evening, the courtyard was empty once more. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in soft shades of amber and rose. The king lingered, eyes tracing the fading footprints of the day's trials. He whispered to himself, almost like a lullaby, almost like a vow. Strength is not only in the body, it is in the will, in the spirit, in the quiet moments when one chooses to rise. And in the hush of the palace, the first seeds of greatness, tall, disciplined, and carefully watched, had been sown. The slow shaping of a kingdom had begun, and with it, the soft tension of anticipation hung in the air, as delicate and insistent as the evening breeze. The next morning, the courtyard was bathed in a soft, silvery light. The dew clung to the grass like tiny jewels, and a hush lingered over the palace grounds, as if the air itself were holding its breath. Friedrich Wilhelm I arrived quietly, observing his recruits with the same careful attention as the day before. Yet today, he noticed something new. Among the tall, disciplined figures, small tensions had begun to stir, glances exchanged, slight hesitations, a subtle competition that the untrained eye would not perceive. Some men straightened their posture with a little more effort, as if to assert their place. Others moved with a quiet pride, aware that the king's gaze was ever watchful. Friedrich Wilhelm I walked slowly along the line, his steps measured. Each movement of his recruits told a story: who feared failure, who sought favor, who carried ambition like a hidden flame. He listened to the faint whispers of thought in the courtyard, feeling the currents of rivalry shift and twist like shadows on the stone. In the hush of the morning, he realized that shaping an army was not merely a matter of height and strength, but of character. The strongest bodies could falter if the spirit wavered, the tallest men could stumble if pride outweighed discipline. And yet, these quiet rivalries, they were not entirely unwelcome. They carried potential, the raw energy of ambition that, if guided carefully, could become something greater. He stopped in front of two particularly tall recruits, watching as their eyes met with subtle challenge. A faint smile touched the corners of his mouth. Perhaps, he thought, these small sparks of conflict could be the forge in which true greatness was born. As the day moved forward, the king continued his quiet observation, noting small victories, subtle defiance, and moments of unexpected cooperation. Each detail, no matter how slight, was recorded in his mind, woven into the tapestry of his vision. By evening, the sun dipped low, casting long, soft shadows across the courtyard. The tension among the recruits had not resolved, but it had shifted, becoming a delicate rhythm, a quiet undercurrent that promised growth, challenge, and the slow unfolding of potential. Friedrich Wilhelm I lingered, gazing at the fading light, whispering softly to himself. Even in rivalry, strength can rise, if it learns the weight of obedience and the measure of will. And so, the palace settled into quiet once more, the gentle rustle of leaves and distant sounds of the city marking the passage of another day in the slow shaping of a kingdom, tall and disciplined, yet alive with the unseen currents of human ambition. The palace was quiet in the early morning, the soft light of dawn spilling through the tall windows and brushing the floors with gold. Friedrich Wilhelm I walked alone through the empty corridors, the echo of his footsteps a gentle rhythm that accompanied his thoughts. He paused before a tapestry depicting a past battle, the soldiers frozen in time, their faces calm yet determined. In their stillness, he saw a reflection of the kingdom he sought to create, strong, unwavering, and disciplined. But strength alone was not enough. Obedience and loyalty were the foundation upon which greatness could be built. Outside, in the courtyard, the recruits awaited their first subtle trial of character. It was not a test of strength or height, but of attention, patience, and the quiet ability to follow instructions without question. The king watched from a distance, his tall figure framed by the soft morning light, as the men executed their tasks with careful precision. He noted those who faltered, not from weakness, but from hesitation, from the stirrings of pride or doubt. Each movement, each small misstep, was a window into their character. And in this, the king felt a quiet tension: how to guide these men, how to mold them into pillars of the kingdom without breaking their spirits. A breeze whispered through the courtyard, carrying the faint scent of dew and stone. Friedrich Wilhelm I's gaze lingered on a particularly tall recruit, whose steady movements betrayed a mind alert and disciplined. Perhaps this one, perhaps here was a man who could rise above the ordinary. Yet even as he observed, a quiet unease tugged at him. Loyalty, he knew, was fragile. It could be strengthened through guidance, yet also easily shattered by doubt or misjudgment. And the kingdom depended on it, more than any sword or tower. As the trial continued, the recruits began to settle into a rhythm, their movements becoming almost meditative under the king's watchful eye. Small victories, quiet successes, they unfolded like petals in the soft morning light. By the time the sun had climbed higher, the courtyard was filled with the gentle murmur of accomplishment. The king lingered, contemplating the delicate balance of authority and trust, knowing that the measure of loyalty was invisible, yet essential, and that the slow shaping of character was as vital as the shaping of the body. As the day drew to a close, the palace itself seemed to breathe, the walls steeped in quiet anticipation. And in the hush of the evening, Friedrich Wilhelm I whispered to himself, a vow almost lost in the gentle rustle of leaves. A kingdom is not built on fear alone, but on the steadfast hearts of those who choose to serve. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and stone. Friedrich Wilhelm I walked through the courtyard, his gaze sweeping over the recruits as they prepared for their first endurance trial. Today, it was not precision or loyalty under scrutiny, it was stamina, perseverance, and the quiet resilience that separated the ordinary from the exceptional. The men lined up, their breaths visible in the cool dawn. The task before them was simple in description but demanding in practice, a long march across the palace grounds, carrying weight that tested both strength and resolve. The king observed silently, every detail etched into his mind, the shift of a foot, the tightening of a grip, the subtle set of a jaw. Some stumbled at first, their movements uneven, while others found a steady rhythm, their bodies and minds aligning in quiet determination. Friedrich Wilhelm I's thoughts drifted briefly to the soldiers who had served before, imagining their efforts, their struggles, their quiet victories. And in that imagining, he found a strange kinship, a connection across time to the discipline and devotion that built Prussia. Yet even as he observed, a small tension stirred within him. Strength could be taught, stamina could be trained, but resilience, true endurance, was born of the spirit. And in the quiet corners of the courtyard, he wondered which men would endure not only the trials of the day but the unseen tests of character that awaited in the shaping of the kingdom. The march continued, each step measured, each breath controlled. The men moved as if guided by an invisible rhythm, their bodies bending and swaying with the effort, yet their eyes held a quiet determination. Friedrich William I felt a subtle thrill, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, as he watched the first signs of perseverance take shape. By afternoon, the courtyard was quiet again, the trials complete. Some men were weary, their movements slowed, yet their faces held a quiet pride. Others had faltered, their hesitation a soft shadow upon the day's effort. And the king, tall and unwavering, remained, absorbing each detail, weaving it into the growing tapestry of his vision. As evening approached, the light softened into gentle shades of rose and amber. The palace seemed to exhale with the passing day, settling into a hush. Friedrich William I whispered softly to himself, the words barely audible over the rustling leaves. Endurance is more than strength, it is the quiet choice to rise again, to continue when the world would have you falter. And in that quiet, the first pillars of greatness had begun to form, not merely in body, but in spirit, a slow, deliberate shaping of the kingdom that would one day stand tall and resolute. As twilight fell over the palace, the corridors softened under the gentle glow of lanterns. Friedrich William I moved slowly through the halls, each step deliberate, echoing softly against the stone floors. The day's trials had concluded, but his mind lingered on the subtle currents of obedience, loyalty, and respect he had witnessed among the recruits. He paused before a large mirror in the hall, observing his own reflection. Tall, stern, and exacting, he saw the face of a king who demanded more than service. He demanded devotion, not merely from his soldiers, but from the spirit of the kingdom itself. Yet even in the quiet reflection, he recognized a tension within him. The line between fear and respect was delicate, easily blurred. The recruits looked to him with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Some obeyed out of admiration, others out of trepidation. And in that subtle difference, the king perceived a lesson: authority alone was insufficient. True power required the delicate balance of sternness and fairness, command and guidance, expectation and understanding. A soft breeze whispered through the open windows, carrying the faint scent of the gardens beyond. Friedrich William I's thoughts drifted to the young soldiers in the courtyard, those he had begun to shape into the pillars of his vision. Could they rise above fear to find loyalty and respect? Could they learn to trust the discipline he demanded, even when the path was difficult, even when their own doubts pressed upon them? He walked further down the hall, tracing the intricate tapestries depicting past kings. Each figure seemed to watch him, frozen in the quiet dignity of history. And in their silent presence, he felt the weight of legacy, a reminder that greatness was never simply given, but earned through careful shaping of mind, body, and spirit. As night deepened, the palace settled into a hushed rhythm, the soft rustle of curtains and distant footsteps marking the slow passage of time. Friedrich William I lingered near the window, looking out over the sleeping city. In the stillness, he whispered to himself, "Fear may command obedience, but respect commands devotion, and devotion is the soul of a kingdom." And in that soft, reflective moment, he felt the first faint stirrings of a vision becoming real, a kingdom not merely of strong men, but of measured hearts, disciplined spirits, and quiet, enduring loyalty. The morning light filtered softly through the palace windows, casting long, gentle shadows across the courtyard. Friedrich William I arrived quietly, his tall frame moving with the same measured rhythm as the day before. Today, however, he sensed a subtle shift among the recruits, something delicate yet undeniable. The tall men lined up as usual, but their eyes carried a new spark. A glance here, a slight tightening of a jaw there, tiny gestures that spoke of unspoken competition. Rivalries, Friedrich William I mused, were like quiet fires. If tended carefully, they could provide warmth and light; if left unchecked, they could burn unpredictably. He walked slowly among the men, observing. One recruit, slightly taller than the others, moved with ease, exuding calm confidence. Another, slightly younger but strong and determined, stole glances at him, measuring himself, calculating. The king's eyes flickered with interest. These small tensions, these private tests of pride and patience, could reveal more about character than any trial of strength. A soft wind rustled the flags overhead, and Friedrich William I paused, listening to the quiet murmur of movement. He realized that shaping a kingdom required not only discipline and obedience but also an understanding of the human heart. Each spark of rivalry, each subtle contest, could be harnessed or contained. The careful cultivation of such currents might transform ordinary soldiers into pillars of a truly extraordinary army. As the recruits performed their exercises, the tension wove quietly among them. The king noted who faltered under the gaze of peers, who rose to meet subtle challenges, and who watched silently, learning before acting. Every detail, though almost imperceptible, became a thread in his vision of Prussia's future strength. By afternoon, the courtyard hummed with a silent rhythm, the men moving with the quiet intensity of focus and subtle competition. Friedrich William I lingered, imagining the future, imagining the kingdom as a living, breathing organism, where every spark, every rivalry, every choice contributed to its resilience. As dusk settled, painting the sky in soft shades of amber and rose, the king whispered softly to himself. Even in quiet competition, greatness may be born, if one learns to bend ambition toward duty. And so, in the hush of the palace, the first delicate currents of rivalry had begun to flow, a slow, measured tension that promised growth, endurance, and the shaping of something far greater than mere strength alone. Night had fallen over the palace, and the corridors were cloaked in a quiet hush. Candlelight flickered softly, painting warm, golden pools across the stone floors. Friedrich William I walked alone, the steady rhythm of his footsteps the only sound in the stillness. He paused before a small desk, unrolled a parchment, and traced invisible lines with his fingers. The day's observations, the subtle rivalries, the endurance trials, all of it weighed on him. A kingdom, he thought, was not merely a land or a castle, nor simply its soldiers or citizens. It was the careful orchestration of countless hearts and minds, guided with both firmness and care. The king's mind drifted to the future. Generations would come and go, yet the seeds planted today could endure for decades, perhaps centuries. Every decision, every subtle correction, every quiet test of loyalty mattered. And yet, the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily upon him. Could he shape these men without extinguishing their spirit? Could he inspire obedience without breeding fear? He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment, imagining the silent halls of the palace centuries from now. Would they echo with pride or with regret? Would the legacy of discipline, endurance, and loyalty be remembered as greatness, or as tyranny? A soft breeze whispered through the open window, carrying the faint scent of the gardens below. Friedrich William I exhaled slowly, letting the night air brush against his face. There was a quiet lesson in this solitude. The shaping of men, of soldiers, of a kingdom, required patience. Time could reveal weakness, but it could also reveal strength. He rose and moved to the window, gazing out over the sleeping city. Lanterns flickered in distant streets, reflecting in the calm waters of the rivers that cut through Prussia. Each light was a reminder of those who lived under his rule, each a quiet testament to the responsibility he carried. Softly, almost like a lullaby, he whispered to himself. Legacy is not built in haste, it is formed in quiet patience, in careful observation, in the steady shaping of what may endure beyond our own lifetime. And in the gentle night, the king felt the slow pulse of his vision, the quiet rhythm of ambition, of duty, and of the delicate, painstaking art of shaping men who could one day stand as the pillars of a kingdom tall and enduring. The next morning, the courtyard was bathed in a soft, misty light, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and polished stone. Friedrich William I observed the recruits from a distance, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the dewy grass. Today's exercises were not simply about strength or height, they were designed to test patience, judgment, and the quiet balance between personal ambition and duty. The recruits, still young and full of desire to prove themselves, carried a tension in their shoulders, a flicker in their eyes. One man, taller than most, moved with determination, yet a subtle impatience tugged at his movements. Another, smaller but strong, executed each command with careful precision, eyes downcast, his mind focused entirely on obedience. The king noted each detail with quiet fascination. These were not mere soldiers, they were minds wrestling with themselves, struggling to reconcile pride with responsibility. Friedrich William I walked slowly along the line, observing how ambition could both inspire and disrupt. A man too eager could falter under scrutiny, one too cautious could waste potential. The king understood that the subtle management of such currents required patience and insight, much like tending a delicate garden where the growth of each plant was unique and unpredictable. As the sun rose higher, the recruits began to show signs of strain, both physical and mental. Yet through it all, a rhythm emerged, a delicate interplay between individual desire and collective duty. The king's eyes softened as he realized that this tension, though challenging, could be harnessed. Ambition, if guided correctly, could transform into excellence, loyalty, and the quiet strength that formed the backbone of a kingdom. By afternoon, the exercises concluded, leaving the courtyard steeped in a hushed calm. Friedrich William I lingered, gazing at the men as they rested, silently contemplating the delicate balance between guiding them and allowing them to discover their own limits. As evening approached, the palace walls glowed warmly in the setting sun. The king whispered softly, almost to himself. Ambition is not the enemy of duty, it is the fire that, when carefully tended, can illuminate the path of greatness. And in the gentle quiet of the palace, a subtle lesson had taken root, a lesson that would shape the hearts and minds of his soldiers, preparing them for the slow, deliberate forging of a kingdom that demanded strength, loyalty, and patience in equal measure. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows, spilling warm light across the palace courtyard. Friedrich William I stood quietly, observing the recruits as they moved through the exercises of the day. Today, the focus was subtle, humility. It was not enough to be tall, strong, or obedient. To truly serve the kingdom, a soldier had to recognize his place within the whole, to measure ambition against the needs of others. The king watched as some men stumbled, not under weight or physical strain, but under the gentle expectations of precision and patience. One recruit, proud and self-assured, faltered when asked to perform a task that required attention to detail rather than force. His frustration showed briefly in a tight jaw, a flicker of impatience, before he corrected himself. Friedrich Wilhelm I's gaze softened, recognizing the quiet lesson unfolding. Humility, like discipline, could not be commanded, it had to be discovered within. The others moved with varying degrees of grace, some glowing with pride, others humbled by the simplest corrections. And the king, tall and measured, absorbed each moment, noting how the subtleties of character were as vital as any measure of strength. As the sun climbed higher, a hush settled over the courtyard. The air itself seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging the quiet transformations taking place. Friedrich Wilhelm I whispered softly, almost as if offering a secret to the morning breeze. To serve the kingdom is to serve oneself last, and in that choice, true strength is born. By afternoon, the palace courtyard shimmered in the soft light, the polished stones reflecting gentle rays like liquid gold. Friedrich Wilhelm I moved among the recruits, walking slowly, his eyes taking in every subtle movement. Observation had become his tool, his quiet method of shaping character. Each gesture, each glance, each small hesitation revealed a depth beyond mere obedience. The king understood that shaping men required patience, careful attention, and a sensitivity to the nuances of pride, fear, and ambition. A taller recruit paused briefly, unsure of the correct step, and the king watched silently. The hesitation was fleeting, but it spoke volumes. Here was a man learning not only to follow orders but to understand the weight of his actions, the consequences that would ripple across the courtyard and, ultimately, the kingdom itself. Friedrich Wilhelm I felt a quiet thrill, a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. The shaping of men was slow, subtle, and exacting. It demanded time, patience, and a constant presence, much like tending a living garden where every seed had its own rhythm of growth. As the sun began to lower, casting long shadows across the courtyard, the king lingered, reflecting on the day. The men had learned small lessons in humility, endurance, and precision. Yet the greatest lesson, one of loyalty, spirit, and the quiet acceptance of guidance, remained unfolding, like petals opening slowly to the morning light. He whispered softly, a vow carried into the gentle evening air. Every glance, every step, every choice is observed, for in observation lies the shaping of greatness. And in the hushed calm of the palace, the slow, deliberate forging of a kingdom continued, one measured, patient, and quietly meticulous, readying the pillars of Prussia to stand tall in body and spirit. The dawn was pale and quiet, the palace gardens still heavy with dew. Friedrich Wilhelm I moved through the courtyard with a calm, deliberate pace, observing his recruits as they performed their tasks without spoken command. Today's trial was subtle, almost invisible, a test of initiative and perception. The recruits were left to complete a series of tasks that required attention, patience, and foresight. The king watched silently, noting how each man anticipated needs, corrected errors, and adapted to unforeseen challenges. Some moved with ease, their confidence tempered by care. Others hesitated, faltering under the invisible weight of responsibility. Friedrich Wilhelm I's eyes lingered on those moments, recognizing the quiet lessons each man learned about himself and his place within the larger rhythm of the courtyard. A soft breeze stirred the flags overhead, carrying whispers through the air. In that gentle murmur, the king sensed the kingdom itself, the pulse of lives intertwined with purpose, obedience, and ambition. His voice remained still, yet within him, the thrill of discovery quietly pulsed. As the day waned, the courtyard grew hushed, the men finishing their tasks with subtle pride or silent disappointment. Friedrich Wilhelm I remained, tall and unwavering, reflecting on the delicate balance of freedom and guidance, ambition and obedience. Even in silence, character is revealed, he whispered softly. And from quiet observation, a kingdom is shaped. The afternoon sun slanted across the palace walls, painting the courtyard in soft shades of amber and rose. Friedrich Wilhelm I walked slowly among the recruits, his gaze sweeping over each movement, each subtle gesture. Today, he noticed shadows, not of the sun, but of the mind and spirit. Subtle doubts flickered in the eyes of some, quiet rivalries whispered in glances. These shadows, he realized, were as vital as the light. They revealed ambition, hesitation, and the choices that would define each man's path. One recruit, standing taller than the rest, carried himself with calm confidence, yet a flicker of doubt betrayed him. Another moved quietly, almost hidden, yet his small actions spoke of careful calculation and patient observation. Friedrich Wilhelm I watched, understanding that shadows were neither weakness nor fault, they were guides to the unseen currents shaping the heart. The king's steps were measured, deliberate, echoing softly across the courtyard. The men responded instinctively to his presence, aware of observation yet unaware of the full measure of scrutiny. Each shadowed glance, each quiet hesitation, became part of the tapestry he wove in his mind, a careful mapping of potential, of loyalty, of resilience. As evening descended, the courtyard grew calm, the soft rustle of leaves mingling with distant city sounds. Friedrich Wilhelm I lingered, as tracing the long shadows cast by the setting sun. He whispered, as if speaking to the kingdom itself. In the quiet shadows lie truths unseen, and from them, greatness may be drawn. And in the soft, fading light, the careful, patient shaping of men and destiny continued, slow, deliberate, and quietly profound. The morning mist hung low over the palace grounds, curling around the edges of the courtyard like a soft, invisible curtain. Friedrich Wilhelm I emerged from his chambers, his tall, imposing frame casting long shadows in the diffused light. The air was damp with dew, carrying the faint, earthy scent of the gardens beyond the walls. He walked slowly, almost meditatively, observing the recruits assembled for the day's exercises. Today, the focus was not on strength or height, but on expectation, the unseen pressure that could drive men to greatness or shatter them in silence. He watched as a tall recruit struggled with a series of complex formations, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to maintain the precision demanded of him. Another moved with mechanical exactness, his face pale, his pride silent yet palpable. Friedrich Wilhelm I's mind wandered, contemplating the nature of leadership. A kingdom was more than bricks and stones, it was the collection of hearts, wills, and minds that bent toward a single vision. Every glance, every hesitation, every flicker of doubt among these young men was a window into potential, a mirror reflecting the consequences of expectation. He approached the recruits slowly, never raising his voice, letting the weight of presence alone guide them. One misstep, one faltering glance, and he would step forward, correcting not only the movement but the understanding behind it. Discipline, he knew, was not a hammer, it was a delicate, persistent shaping, a constant awareness of both body and spirit. The day stretched on, the sun climbing high, casting golden light across the courtyard. Friedrich William I observed each man, noting who bore the weight gracefully, who struggled silently, and who crumbled under pressure. And with each observation, he felt the slow pulse of his vision, the careful, relentless molding of Prussia's future. As dusk approached, painting the sky in amber and rose, he lingered alone in the quiet courtyard. Shadows stretched across the polished stone, soft and mysterious. The king whispered softly to himself, almost like a lullaby. To bear expectation is to glimpse one's own limits, and to rise above them is to touch greatness. The evening settled over the palace like a velvet shroud, the air still and scented faintly with candle wax and blooming night flowers. Friedrich William I walked slowly along the corridors, his thoughts circling the events of the day. Outside, in the courtyard, the recruits moved with quiet diligence, but the king's mind perceived the subtle currents swirling beneath their disciplined movements. Small rivalries had grown into quiet, almost invisible tensions. One recruit's pride whispered challenges to another, a hint of envy shadowed the tall men who sought recognition in the king's eyes. Friedrich William I sensed it all, the unspoken hierarchies, the silent tests of patience and courage. To him, these currents were not disruptions but raw material, the unpredictable elements he could mold into strength. He paused near a window, watching the soft movement of trees in the night wind. Shadows stretched across the courtyard like threads of unseen design, and in those shadows, he imagined the invisible lines connecting ambition, fear, and loyalty. Every flicker of doubt, every quiet glance, was a lesson waiting to be learned. His thoughts drifted to the idea of legacy. A kingdom was not built in a day, nor was greatness imposed by mere authority. It was sculpted, patiently, with attention to the subtleties of human nature. The king reflected on the delicate balance required. Too much force would break, too little would fail to shape. The art of leadership, he realized, was not only in commanding bodies but in guiding spirits without crushing them. A gentle breeze rustled the curtains, carrying the soft scent of night. Friedrich William I whispered softly, a vow to himself and to the kingdom. Every thought, every glance, every hidden current shapes what may endure, and in their currents, we find the measure of strength, the pulse of loyalty, and the slow unfolding of destiny. The palace seemed to exhale in quiet approval, and in that soft, profound stillness, the king felt the invisible threads of his vision weaving together. The shaping of men, the careful cultivation of loyalty, and the patient molding of greatness continued, slow and deliberate, echoing into the shadows of night. The dawn crept slowly over the palace walls, painting the courtyard in muted shades of gold and gray. Friedrich William I moved quietly along the polished stone, the soft rhythm of his boots echoing in the still air. Today's focus was patience, not the obedience of the body, but the endurance of the mind, the silent steadiness that could withstand pressure without complaint. The recruits were arranged in the courtyard, each carrying out tasks designed to test more than strength. They moved carefully, repeating precise motions, correcting small errors, following instructions without haste or hesitation. Friedrich Wilhelm I's eyes scanned each figure, noting the tremors of frustration that threatened to break their focus, the small victories where perseverance quietly emerged. He stopped to watch a young recruit, tall and strong, who struggled with a task that required both coordination and timing. The man's face was tense, sweat beading on his brow, yet he continued, refusing to yield to impatience. Friedrich Wilhelm I's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. This was what he sought, not merely compliance, but the subtle mastery of one's own impulses. Walking along the edge of the courtyard, the king reflected on the lessons of patience he himself had learned in life. Leadership demanded it, vision required it, and the shaping of men depended upon it. One false move, one display of weakness, could ripple through the ranks, yet too much pressure could crush potential before it ever bloomed. The day stretched on slowly, each movement deliberate, each observation meticulous. Friedrich Wilhelm I felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the awareness that patience was not taught in hours, but in the careful, repeated shaping of moments. As dusk fell, soft shades of amber and lavender draping the courtyard, he lingered alone. A gentle wind whispered through the gardens, and he whispered softly to himself. Patience is the quiet forge where strength is tempered, and in its slow fire, the soul of a kingdom is revealed. The night deepened, and the palace corridors were silent, save for the soft flicker of lanterns and the distant hum of the city beyond the walls. Friedrich Wilhelm I moved along the upper gallery, gazing down at the courtyard where his recruits rested after the day's trials. Even in repose, he could sense the whispers of ambition that ran beneath the surface. Glances exchanged in silence, slight gestures of pride or envy, unspoken comparisons, all small, almost invisible, yet potent in shaping character. To the untrained eye, the soldiers appeared disciplined, uniform, obedient. To the king, every movement spoke volumes. He recalled the young men from earlier that day, the tall, eager recruit who sought recognition, the quieter figure who observed before acting, the one who faltered under pressure yet rose again with quiet determination. Each carried a thread of ambition, yet each also faced the choice between personal pride and duty to the kingdom. Friedrich Wilhelm I's gaze softened, reflecting on the delicate balance required of a ruler. Ambition could be a spark of brilliance or a flicker of destruction. It could drive a man to greatness or unravel him under the weight of expectation. And here, in these quiet, formative moments, the kingdom's future was being measured, not in swords or height, but in the hearts of those who would carry its strength. A gentle breeze stirred the curtains, carrying the faint scent of night blossoms. The king leaned on the railing, his thoughts circling the invisible currents of loyalty, rivalry, and courage. He understood that shaping greatness required careful cultivation, constant observation, and the patience to allow men to discover the measure of their own ambition. As stars began to shimmer above, he whispered softly to himself. Ambition, when guided by duty, can become the silent heartbeat of a kingdom, but left untamed, it may unravel even the tallest pillars. And in the hushed, silvered light of night, Friedrich Wilhelm I felt the quiet pulse of destiny, the slow, deliberate weaving of loyalty, strength, and subtle ambition into the living foundation of Prussia. The courtyard was quiet in the soft light of early morning, the air still, as though holding its breath. Friedrich Wilhelm I walked slowly among the recruits, tall and measured, yet attuned to the faintest stirrings of emotion. Today, a subtle tension had begun to ripple through the men, small flickers of discontent, whispered frustrations, rivalries that had once been invisible now revealed themselves in fleeting glances and clenched jaws. He paused to observe a group of taller recruits. One, his shoulders stiff, cast a sideways glance at another who moved with fluid ease. The king felt a small thrill, not of malice, but of curiosity. Conflict, carefully guided, could reveal strength, resilience, and character. Yet unchecked, it could corrode loyalty, destabilize discipline, and undermine the very foundation of his vision. Friedrich William I walked among them, never raising his voice, but letting his presence weigh like a silent measure. The men responded instinctively, correcting their postures, aligning themselves with expectation, yet the tension remained, subtle and potent. It was a reminder that the shaping of men required vigilance not only of the body but of the mind and spirit. He stopped before a particularly proud recruit, observing the flicker of defiance in his eyes. The king's mind traced the invisible currents, ambition, fear, envy, loyalty, all intertwined. Here lay both danger and opportunity, the delicate threads that could be woven into greatness or unraveled into chaos. As the day progressed, Friedrich William I continued his silent watch, noting every nuance, every faltering step, every small victory over ego and impatience. The palace seemed to hum with tension, yet also with potential, as if the very walls recognized the slow forging of discipline, ambition, and resilience that would one day stand as pillars of Prussia. As evening fell, the shadows deepened, stretching long and quiet across the courtyard. The king whispered softly, almost to the air itself. Even discord has its place, for in its careful shaping lies the measure of true strength. The morning dawned cool and gray, the palace steeped in quiet expectation. Friedrich William I observed his recruits, tall and disciplined, yet each carrying the invisible weight of obedience, a burden that was as much psychological as it was physical. Today's exercise was subtle, not force, not endurance, but the quiet testing of spirit under unrelenting expectation. The men moved in precise formations, their motions deliberate, yet Friedrich William I's gaze detected the strain behind their controlled faces. Some faltered, not from weakness, but from the pressure of performing perfectly under observation. Others moved with calm determination, yet their eyes betrayed the inner calculations of pride and self-preservation. The king walked slowly among them, absorbing the rhythm of the courtyard, the gentle shuffle of boots on stone, the faint exhalations, the subtle hesitation before each movement. Each action was a dialogue, a negotiation between personal will and the demands of duty. He noted who bore this weight gracefully, who crumbled silently, and who learned, slowly, to reconcile obedience with self-respect. A breeze stirred, rustling the flags above, carrying with it a sense of quiet tension and anticipation. Friedrich William I paused to reflect. The shaping of men required more than command, it demanded patience, perception, and the subtle cultivation of resilience. Obedience, he understood, was not merely compliance, it was the willing alignment of will with vision, a delicate thread connecting individual ambition to the needs of the kingdom. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the courtyard, the king lingered, tall and unwavering, whispering softly to himself. Obedience is not the absence of thought, it is the quiet mastery of self, the alignment of will with purpose, and the foundation upon which greatness endures. In the stillness of the palace, the slow, meticulous shaping of men continued, each movement, each glance, each flicker of doubt or determination woven into the living fabric of the kingdom. The late afternoon sun cast a muted glow over the courtyard, turning the polished stones to soft amber. Friedrich William I walked slowly along the perimeter, observing the recruits with an intensity that seemed to slow time itself. Today, a subtle strain had begun to show, not in muscles or height, but in spirit. The repeated trials, the constant observation, the delicate balance of pride and obedience, each weighed invisibly upon the men. One recruit, tall and broad, tightened his jaw as he executed a particularly complex maneuver. Another faltered, hesitating for a heartbeat, before correcting himself with painstaking care. Friedrich Wilhelm I's eyes traced every movement, every micro-expression, recognizing that the forging of character was as intricate as any sword or tower. He paused, gazing at the sky as clouds drifted lazily across the sun. A thought lingered in his mind: strength without resilience was fragile, obedience without understanding was brittle, and ambition without guidance could become ruinous. These men were his responsibility, the living pillars of a vision that demanded patience, precision, and unwavering attention. As he moved among them, the king noted the small, almost imperceptible gestures of tension, clenched fists, shifting weight, fleeting eye contact. Each revealed inner struggles, doubt, fear, pride, desire. And in these subtle signs, he saw both vulnerability and potential. The shaping of greatness required not only discipline, but care, perception, and an understanding of the unseen strain that lived in every human heart. By evening, as shadows stretched long and soft across the courtyard, Friedrich William I lingered, eyes tracing the polished stone. He whispered, almost to the quiet night itself. The unseen strain tests the spirit, refines it, and only through its endurance does true strength emerge. The early morning mist lingered over the palace, soft and ethereal, as if the world itself paused in anticipation. Friedrich William I moved along the courtyard, observing the recruits with a patient, almost meditative focus. Today, the first true rivalries had begun to surface, subtle yet undeniable, threading tension through the disciplined ranks. Two recruits, similar in height and strength, exchanged quiet glances, each measuring the other. A slight hesitation in one step, a controlled smile in the other, these were the silent signs of ambition colliding with duty. The king's gaze lingered, absorbing every nuance. Rivalry, he knew, could either sharpen resolve or fracture loyalty. He walked slowly among them, noting how each man responded. One sought to dominate with visible effort, another moved with quiet calculation, while a third observed, learning before acting. Friedrich William I realized that these currents, envy, ambition, pride, were as vital to the shaping of the kingdom as obedience or endurance. As the day progressed, the tension among the men built imperceptibly, like a wind rising unseen until it sways the branches. Friedrich William I's mind wandered to the delicate balance of leadership. Too much pressure, and ambition could turn destructive; too little, and the potential would go unrealized. Each interaction, each unspoken contest, became a thread in the tapestry of character he was weaving. By late afternoon, the courtyard had settled into a tense rhythm, the quiet rivalry fueling both discipline and subtle growth. Friedrich William I lingered, tall and watchful, reflecting on the slow, deliberate work of shaping not just bodies, but hearts and minds. He whispered softly, almost like a secret to the evening breeze. Rivalry is the hidden forge. In its quiet fire, strength is tempered, character is revealed, and the pillars of a kingdom are born. The palace was bathed in the muted glow of late afternoon, shadows stretching long across the courtyard. Friedrich William I moved slowly among his recruits, tall and exacting, yet his attention was drawn to the unspoken currents swirling beneath their disciplined exterior. Today, he noticed the first signs of secrets, small hesitations, fleeting glances, quiet exchanges that went unnoticed by the others. One recruit, tall and proud, adjusted his posture not out of command but out of awareness of being observed. Another whispered softly to a companion, words lost in the breeze but intentions clear to those who knew how to watch. Friedrich William I paused, considering the delicate balance of trust, authority, and perception. Secrets, he realized, were like invisible threads. They could strengthen alliances or quietly unravel cohesion. Each man carried private thoughts, ambitions, and fears, hidden beneath the carefully maintained exterior of obedience. And in these hidden places, the true measure of character could be glimpsed. He walked slowly among them, absorbing every small movement, every subtle exchange. The air seemed thick with unspoken tension, a quiet reminder that loyalty was never absolute and that ambition, if left unchecked, could quietly shift the course of the day. As evening fell, painting the courtyard in soft amber and rose, Friedrich William I lingered near a marble fountain, the water reflecting both light and shadow. He whispered softly to himself. Within the unseen lies truth, and in its careful understanding, strength and loyalty are forged. The morning arrived with a soft mist, the palace steeped in quiet anticipation. Friedrich William I observed the recruits as they prepared for the day's exercises, aware that each carried a subtle burden, the burden of choice. Every action, every hesitation, every glance carried weight, and the consequences rippled silently through the courtyard. One recruit faced a choice between asserting pride and submitting to discipline. Another balanced the desire to excel with the knowledge that missteps would not go unnoticed. Friedrich William I walked among them, watching carefully, sensing the internal battles waged behind disciplined faces. He understood that the shaping of men required more than command, it required recognition of the human heart, with all its ambition, doubt, and desire. To guide effectively, he needed to see not only what was done, but what was felt, what was chosen, and what was feared. Each choice made under observation became a small measure of character, a quiet indicator of potential. The day wore on slowly, each movement deliberate, each decision weighted. Friedrich William I noted subtle signs of hesitation and resolve, understanding that the men's responses would echo beyond the courtyard, shaping not only their own future but that of the kingdom itself. As the sun sank low, the shadows lengthened, and the king paused atop the gallery stairs, gazing at the quiet, tense figures below. He whispered softly, almost to the evening wind. Every choice carries a weight, and in the endurance of that weight, the measure of loyalty and strength is revealed. The palace settled into hush once more, the slow, meticulous forging of men and destiny continuing, deliberate and profound, the unseen threads of ambition, loyalty, and character weaving silently into the fabric of Prussia. The morning light filtered through the high windows, soft and golden, illuminating the courtyard with a gentle warmth. Friedrich William I walked slowly among his recruits, each step deliberate, measured. Today's trial was not of height, strength, or precision, it was of resolve, the quiet endurance of mind and spirit under the unrelenting gaze of expectation. The men carried out their tasks with varying degrees of skill and confidence. One recruit, tall and imposing, faltered briefly under the pressure of continuous observation, his pride warring with the need to submit to discipline. Another moved with calm assurance, yet behind his measured movements, subtle doubt flickered like a candle struggling in the wind. Friedrich William I watched closely, noting every tremor, every hesitation, every flicker of courage. The courtyard seemed suspended in time, the air thick with anticipation, as if the very stones themselves understood the weight of the trial. Here, he realized, was the defining moment, the test not of obedience, but of inner strength, the silent resolve to endure, to rise, to persist when every instinct whispered retreat. As the sun climbed higher, shadows stretched across the polished stone, softening edges and highlighting small victories of perseverance. The king felt a quiet satisfaction, tempered by awareness of the fragility of human spirit. Resolve, like the kingdom itself, was forged slowly, through patience, observation, and careful shaping of mind and heart. He whispered softly, almost as a lullaby to the morning air. Resolve is born not in triumph, but in quiet endurance, and in its steadfastness, greatness awakens. Afternoon came with gentle warmth, the courtyard glowing in muted gold. Friedrich William I observed the recruits as they moved in harmony, yet beneath their disciplined motions, subtle currents of ambition, doubt, and rivalry persisted. Today, he sought alignment, the quiet joining of mind, body, and spirit with purpose. Some recruits achieved it naturally, their movements flowing with calm precision, eyes steady and minds focused. Others struggled, their pride or hesitation creating a tension that rippled outward. Friedrich William I walked among them silently, letting his presence guide without interference, his keen gaze noting the intricate interplay of determination, humility, and duty. He paused at the center of the courtyard, watching the men move like threads in a slow, deliberate weave. Each step, each adjustment, each small choice was part of a larger pattern, a quiet alignment not imposed by force, but discovered through patient observation, subtle guidance, and the slow realization of one's place within the whole. As the day waned, Friedrich William I stood alone in the golden light, the soft murmur of the courtyard echoing faintly. He whispered to himself, voice barely audible. True alignment is found in stillness, in patience, in the quiet joining of heart and purpose, and from it, a kingdom may rise, steady and enduring. Night fell gently over the palace, the air soft and still, carrying the faint scent of stone, dew, and night-blooming flowers. Friedrich William I moved slowly through the courtyard, his eyes sweeping over the recruits who rested after the long, measured trials of day and night. He observed them quietly, tall and exacting, yet with a subtle warmth. Each man, through struggle, hesitation, ambition, and endurance, had begun to embody the pillars of the kingdom, discipline tempered with patience, pride balanced by humility, strength guided by loyalty. The palace itself seemed to breathe in quiet satisfaction, the shadows stretching long and soft across the polished stones, mirroring the careful shaping of body and spirit within. Friedrich William I paused, gazing up at the night sky, stars shimmering like distant fires illuminating the slow pulse of destiny. He whispered softly, almost as a benediction, letting the words drift on the night air. These are the pillars of a kingdom, quiet, steadfast, and enduring. Each heart, each choice, each moment of resilience is a stone laid in the foundation of greatness. And in their silent strength, the kingdom stands tall, patient, and eternal. The courtyard settled into deep quiet, the palace enveloped in stillness. Outside, the city slept under the watchful sky, unaware of the slow, meticulous forging that had taken place. Within the walls, a kingdom of men, shaped with care, patience, and unwavering attention, had begun to stand, not merely in body, but in spirit, ready to endure across generations. And in that stillness, Friedrich William I remained, tall, contemplative, and quietly triumphant, the slow heartbeat of his vision echoing softly into the night. The palace is quiet now. The night is deep, the air soft and still, and every stone, every shadow, every flicker of light carries the echo of a day slowly, patiently lived. You have walked these halls, witnessed the shaping of strength, patience, and loyalty, and felt the subtle currents of ambition and reflection. Let your body sink into comfort. Let your thoughts drift gently like clouds over the palace courtyard. The quiet pillars of history stand tall around you, unwavering and calm, and so too can your own mind rest in their steady presence. If you felt at peace with this story, consider supporting the channel with a subscription. Your quiet support helps bring more gentle journeys like this, each one crafted for calm, reflection, and sleep. Take a deep breath, and as you exhale, let the night carry you softly into rest. Good night.